Welcome to the banks of the Nile River in Egypt in the year 1178 BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses III. When Egypt faces invasion by the mysterious Sea Peoples, a coalition of maritime raiders who have already destroyed the Hittite Empire and numerous coastal cities across the Mediterranean. And when the Egyptian war fleet is preparing for the greatest naval battle in ancient history, a confrontation that will determine whether Egypt survives as an independent kingdom or falls to foreign conquest like so many neighboring civilizations. For the next few hours, we will explore how ancient Egyptian warriors actually fought river battles on the Nile, examining the ships that served as floating platforms for combat, the weapons and tactics adapted to fighting on water, the logistics of maintaining a war fleet in the ancient world, and the unique challenges of naval warfare in an era when most battles were fought on land. If you enjoy these detailed explorations of ancient military practices and the realities behind legendary battles, please like and subscribe to support our channel. Our story begins at a military harbor near the Nile Delta, where approximately 60 Egyptian warships are being prepared for battle against a Sea Peoples fleet that intelligence reports indicate is approaching the delta from the Mediterranean, intending to invade Egypt by sailing up the Nile and striking at the heartland of Egyptian power. A ship captain named Amenhotep stands on the deck of his vessel, a warship approximately 70 feet long and 12 feet wide, constructed from Lebanese cedar and acacia wood, powered by both sail and oars, carrying a crew of 30 rowers plus 20 warriors and marines. Amenhotep is 40 years old, a career military officer who has served in the Egyptian Navy for 25 years, who has commanded ships for the past decade, and who has fought in numerous smaller engagements against Libyan raiders and Nubian river pirates. But this approaching battle will be different, larger in scale, against a more formidable enemy, with the survival of Egypt itself at stake. Amenhotep understands the gravity of the situation, and he is determined that his ship and crew will perform effectively when the battle begins. The ship Amenhotep commands is characteristic of Egyptian warships of the late Bronze Age, relatively shallow drafted vessels designed for river operations rather than for open sea navigation, built for speed and maneuverability rather than for heavy construction, equipped for fighting as platforms for warriors rather than as ramming vessels like the later Greek and Roman galleys. The hull is constructed from planks of wood, primarily Lebanese cedar for the main structure, with acacia wood used for internal framing and for components requiring hardness and durability. The planks are joined using mortise and tenon joints, carefully cut slots and matching pegs that fit together, creating strong connections without the need for iron nails, which are expensive and scarce in Bronze Age Egypt. The joints are further reinforced with rope lashings made from papyrus fiber, creating flexible connections that can absorb the stresses of water movement and combat without breaking. This rope-reinforced construction is characteristic of Egyptian shipbuilding. The combination of rigid wooden joints and flexible rope bindings creates structures that are both strong and resilient. The ship's deck is approximately 6 feet above the waterline, providing elevation for warriors shooting arrows or throwing spears. The sides of the ship have wooden railings, and in some areas, leather or woven reed shields that provide some protection for the crew against enemy missiles. These side protections are not armor in the sense of being able to stop all weapons, but they do provide cover against arrows shot from distance and against thrown spears. The propulsion system combines sails and oars. The ship has a single large sail made from woven linen, approximately 30 feet tall and 20 feet wide when fully extended, mounted on a bipod mast that can be lowered when not needed. The sail allows the ship to travel efficiently when wind conditions are favorable, covering perhaps 5 to 6 miles per hour with a good wind. But the Nile's winds are not always favorable for the direction of travel needed. So the ship also has 30 oars, 15 per side, arranged in a single bank, that allow the crew to row when wind is inadequate or when precise maneuvering is required. Under oar power alone, the ship can maintain perhaps 3 miles per hour for extended periods, or can sprint at perhaps 5 miles per hour for short bursts during combat maneuvers. The crew is organized into specialized roles. The 30 rowers are primarily conscripts, farmers and laborers who owe service to Pharaoh, and who have been trained in rowing, but who are not professional soldiers. They provide the muscle power for propulsion, but are not expected to fight, except as a last resort if the ship is boarded. The 20 warriors are professional soldiers, men who have trained for years in weapons use, who have fought in previous campaigns, who form the ship's combat power. They are equipped with bows, spears, shields, and short swords or axes, and they will fight from the deck, attempting to kill enemy warriors and to defend against boarders. Amenhotep himself, as captain, commands the ship and makes tactical decisions. He is assisted by a steersman who controls the ship's steering oars, 2 large oars mounted at the stern, used for directional control, by a sailing master who manages the sail and rigging, and by a marine commander who leads the warriors in combat. This morning, as the sun rises over the Nile and illuminates the assembled war fleet, Amenhotep is conducting final preparations for the battle expected to occur later today. The preparations are both physical, ensuring the ship is ready for combat, and psychological, preparing the crew for the violence and danger they will face. The physical preparations begin with a thorough inspection of the ship's hull. Amenhotep walks slowly around the vessel while it is still beached, examining the planking for cracks or damage, checking the rope lashings for wear, verifying that the mortise and tenon joints are sound. Any problems discovered now can potentially be repaired before battle. Problems discovered during battle could prove fatal. Finding the hull sound, he orders the ship launched into the water. The crew, 60 men total, heaves the vessel down the beach and into the Nile, the ship sliding on log rollers, finally floating free in the river. The ship settles into the water, sitting with approximately 2 feet of draft, shallow enough to navigate the Nile's sandbanks and shallows, but deep enough to provide stability. Once afloat, the crew boards and begins preparing the ship's equipment. The mast is raised and secured. The sail is checked for tears or weak spots. The linen fabric is strong, but can be damaged by wind stress or by enemy fire arrows. The rigging, the ropes that control the sail's position, is checked and adjusted. The oars are brought aboard and fitted into their oar locks, wooden or leather loops that hold the oar shafts while allowing them to pivot for rowing. Each rower takes his position on the rowing benches, checking that his oar is the right length and that he has adequate space to row without interfering with the rowers on either side. The weapons are distributed and checked. Each warrior receives arrows, approximately 30 arrows per man, stored in leather quivers with bronze or fire-hardened wood points, with fletching made from goose or duck feathers. The bows themselves, composite bows made from wood, horn, and sinew, similar in construction to later Asian composite bows, are strung and tested. The spears, approximately 6 to 8 feet long, with bronze or copper points, are positioned on deck where they can be quickly grabbed during combat. The shields, rectangular wooden frames covered with leather, approximately 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide, are stacked near the fighting positions. The short swords and axes that serve as backup weapons are checked to ensure they are sharp and securely hafted. Amenhotep also checks the ship's special equipment for naval combat. Fire pots, ceramic vessels filled with oil-soaked materials that can be ignited and thrown to start fires on enemy ships, are positioned safely away from the rowing benches but close enough to be accessed during battle. Grappling hooks attached to ropes, used for pulling alongside enemy vessels or for preventing enemy ships from escaping, are coiled and ready. As the preparations near completion, Amenhotep addresses his crew, delivering the speech that commanders have given before battles throughout history, attempting to inspire courage, to focus attention on duty, to prepare men psychologically for the violence ahead. "Today we fight for Egypt," he tells them, his voice carrying across the deck. "The sea peoples come to destroy our homes, to enslave our families, to steal the wealth that generations of Egyptians have built. They have destroyed the Hittites, they have burned cities across the Great Green Sea, and now they come for us. But we are Egyptians. We are the servants of Pharaoh Ramses, beloved of the gods, chosen by Ra himself to rule the 2 lands. We fight on the Nile, the sacred river given by the gods to make Egypt prosperous. The gods fight with us. The righteousness of our cause strengthens our arms. We will not fail." The crew responds with shouts and with the striking of spear butts against shields, the traditional Egyptian expression of martial enthusiasm. The noise carries across the water to the other ships of the fleet, and soon the entire harbor echoes with the sound of warriors preparing for battle. As the fleet begins to move, 60 warships, plus numerous smaller support vessels, forming into a loose battle formation. Amenhotep feels the familiar combination of fear and determination that precedes combat. He has fought before, has killed enemies, has seen comrades die, has learned that battle is not the glorious adventure that songs describe, but is instead a chaotic, terrifying experience where survival depends partly on skill, but largely on luck. But he also knows his duty. He is a servant of Pharaoh, a defender of Egypt, a ship captain entrusted with the lives of his crew, and with a role in the larger battle that will determine Egypt's fate. He will do his duty, will command his ship effectively, will fight bravely, and will trust the gods to determine the outcome. The Egyptian war fleet sails north toward the delta, where scouts report that the Sea People's fleet has entered the Nile and is advancing southward. The two forces are converging toward a confrontation that will be recorded in temple reliefs, that will be celebrated in Egyptian accounts as a great victory, and that represents the largest naval battle of the Bronze Age, a clash between Egyptian river warfare and the maritime raiders who have terrorized the Mediterranean. After several hours of sailing north through the Nile Delta's complex network of channels and waterways, the Egyptian fleet receives word from scouts that the enemy fleet is visible ahead, approximately 50 to 60 Sea People's vessels advancing up the main Nile Channel, apparently intending to strike at Memphis, Egypt's administrative capital. Admiral Chemhu, commander of the Egyptian fleet, signals for the fleet to begin forming battle array, and the ships respond by adjusting their positions according to the tactical plan that has been developed over the preceding days. Let us examine the tactics and formations of ancient river warfare through the preparations and maneuvers that Amenhotep and his ship perform as the fleets approach each other. The Egyptian tactical approach to river battle is based on several key principles that reflect both the physical characteristics of the Nile and the capabilities and limitations of Bronze Age warships. First, the battle will be fought at relatively close range, perhaps 50 to 200 yards between fleets, because the primary weapons are bows and spears that have limited range. Naval battles of this era are not long-range artillery duels, but are instead close-quarters affairs, where warriors shoot arrows and throw spears at enemy ships, and where ships attempt to come alongside each other for boarding actions. Second, maneuverability is crucial. The side that can position its ships advantageously, bringing many ships to bear against fewer enemy ships, approaching from favorable angles, avoiding being surrounded, will likely win the battle. The Nile's channels, while wide, are not unlimited in width, so positioning and formation are constrained by geography. Third, the battle will likely be decided by the effectiveness of archery and by boarding actions. Egyptian tactics emphasize using massed arrow fire to inflict casualties on enemy crews, to set enemy ships on fire using fire arrows, and to demoralize enemies before closing for boarding. The boarding actions, where warriors jump from ship to ship engaging in hand-to-hand combat, are decisive moments that determine which ships are captured or destroyed. The Egyptian formation is designed to maximize these tactical principles. The fleet forms into 3 divisions, a center force of approximately 25 ships and 2 wings of approximately 15 to 18 ships each. This formation creates a concave arc facing the approaching enemy, with the center slightly refused, pulled back, relative to the wings. The purpose of this formation is to envelop the enemy fleet, to engage their front with the center, while the wings swing forward to attack the enemy flanks and rear. If successfully executed, the formation will surround the enemy fleet, allowing the Egyptians to concentrate superior numbers against isolated enemy ships. Amenhotep's ship is assigned to the right wing of the formation, positioned as one of the outer ships that will attempt to sweep around the enemy's left flank. His orders are to maintain formation until the signal to attack is given, then to advance at maximum speed toward the enemy flank, to engage with arrow fire as he closes, and to attempt boarding if opportunities arise. As the fleets close to within perhaps a mile of each other, both sides become visible to naked eye observation. The Sea People's fleet is impressive and terrifying. Their ships are somewhat larger than the Egyptian vessels, perhaps 80 to 90 feet long, with higher sides providing more protection for crews, with distinctive high prows carved into bird or animal heads that are meant to intimidate enemies and to invoke divine protection. The Sea People's warriors are visible on the decks, men wearing bronze armor and helmets with distinctive horned or feathered designs, carrying round shields and long spears, shouting war cries that carry across the water. Their reputation as fierce warriors who have destroyed great kingdoms creates psychological pressure on the Egyptian crews. But the Egyptians also present a formidable appearance. The Egyptian ships fly standards, showing the names and symbols of their nomes, administrative districts, religious and regional symbols that invoke divine protection and that create identity and pride. The warriors wear linen armor, multiple layers of stiffened linen that provide reasonable protection against cuts and arrows while being lighter and cooler than bronze, and carry the traditional Egyptian weapons: composite bows, spears, khopesh swords, distinctive sickle-shaped swords that combine cutting and hooking actions. The visual confrontation, two large fleets approaching each other on the sacred Nile, standards flying, warriors shouting, the fate of civilizations hanging in the balance, is dramatic and psychologically intense even before any violence begins. As the range closes to perhaps half a mile, both fleets begin final preparations for combat. On Amenhotep's ship, the archers string their bows and nock arrows, ready to shoot as soon as they come within effective range. The rowers are given instructions to be ready for rapid maneuvers. The battle will require quick changes in speed and direction, and the rowers must respond immediately to commands, despite the chaos and fear of combat. The sail is furled and the mast is lowered. Under battle conditions, ships operate under oar power alone, which provides better control and which eliminates the vulnerability of having a large sail that can be set on fire by enemy arrows. The 30 rowers take their positions, oars ready, waiting for commands. Amenhotep stands at the stern near the steersman, from where he can observe the battle and give orders. He holds a spear in one hand and a shield in the other. As captain, he will fight if necessary, though his primary role is command and coordination. The marine commander, a professional soldier named Napt, organizes the 20 warriors into fighting positions along the sides of the ship. 10 warriors are positioned along the starboard side, the right side facing the enemy, while the other 10 are along the port side, ready to shift to whichever side becomes engaged. Each warrior has his bow strung and ready, with a quiver of 30 arrows within easy reach. The spears are stacked against the deck railings, quickly accessible. The fire pots are positioned in metal braziers where they can be ignited using coals carried in protected containers. At approximately a quarter-mile separation, Admiral Chemhu signals the attack. The signal is visual, a large flag raised on the flagship, and is repeated by other ships to ensure all see it. The command is clear: advance and engage. The Egyptian fleet surges forward, 60 ships rowing in coordinated rhythm, oars rising and falling, ships accelerating to their maximum sustainable speed of approximately 4 to 5 miles per hour. The sound is tremendous. The splash of hundreds of oars, the shouting of rowing masters keeping rhythm, the war cries of warriors, the creaking of wooden hulls under stress. The Sea People's fleet also advances, their ships larger and perhaps slightly slower, but formidable in appearance and in the fierce reputation of their crews. The range closes rapidly, a quarter mile becoming 300 yards, becoming 200 yards. At 200 yards, still technically within bow range but beyond effective accuracy, some of the most eager archers on both sides begin shooting, their arrows arcing high through the air, falling among the enemy ships with minimal effect at this range. But at 150 yards, the range your experienced archers can achieve reasonable accuracy, the real arrow storm begins. Amenhotep gives the command: archers, shoot at will, aim for their crews. The 10 archers on the starboard side begin shooting, each man drawing his powerful composite bow to full draw, approximately 30 inches, and loosing arrows toward the approaching enemy ships at a rate of perhaps 1 arrow every 5 to 10 seconds. The arrows fly in flat arcs at this relatively close range, covering the distance in approximately 2 seconds, striking enemy ships with tremendous force. The enemy archers are also shooting, and Amenhotep's ship is struck by multiple arrows. Most strike the wooden hull or the deck, embedding harmlessly. Some strike the leather shields positioned along the railings, stopped by the layered hide. But some find vulnerable targets. One rower is struck in the shoulder, crying out in pain, his oar dropping from his grip. Another arrow strikes a warrior in the thigh, penetrating through the linen armor, the man falling to the deck. Nacht, the marine commander, maintains discipline among the warriors. Keep shooting, don't watch the casualties, focus on killing enemies. The arrow exchange continues as the range closes to 100 yards, then to 75 yards. At this close range, the arrow fire becomes devastating. Amenhotep watches as one of the enemy ships, directly ahead of his vessel, is hit by concentrated fire from multiple Egyptian ships. Dozens of arrows strike the ship within seconds, many fighting crew members, creating casualties and confusion. He sees an enemy warrior struck in the face, the man dropping instantly. Another is hit in the chest, the arrow penetrating the bronze breastplate at close range, the man stumbling backward and falling overboard. The enemy ship's rowing rhythm falters as rowers are hit, oars becoming uncoordinated, the ship losing speed and maneuverability. This is the moment Amenhotep has been waiting for, an enemy ship damaged and vulnerable. He shouts orders. Steersman, close with that ship. Rowers, full speed. Marines, prepare for boarding. His ship surges forward, the rowers responding with maximum effort, the ship accelerating toward the damaged enemy vessel. At approximately 50 yards, Amenhotep orders the firepots lit and thrown. Warriors ignite the oil-soaked materials in the ceramic firepots using the burning coals, then hurl the pots toward the enemy ship. The pots arc through the air, spinning, trailing smoke and small flames. Two miss, splashing into the water, but one strikes the enemy ship's deck, shattering, spreading burning oil across the wooden surface. The fire takes hold almost immediately. The dry wood and the oil fuel a rapidly spreading blaze. Enemy warriors attempt to fight the fire using water buckets, but the flames spread faster than they can control. Within minutes, the enemy ship is seriously ablaze, flames climbing the mast and rigging, smoke billowing, the crew beginning to abandon ship by jumping into the Nile. Amenhotep's ship closes to within 20 yards of the burning vessel, close enough that his archers can shoot with point-blank accuracy at the enemy warriors still aboard. The Marines prepare grappling hooks, ready to pull alongside if an opportunity for boarding presents itself, though the fire makes this dangerous. But before they can close further, another Sea People's ship appears from the smoke and confusion, rowing hard toward Amenhotep's vessel, its warriors shooting arrows, its intention clearly to ram or to board. Evasive action, Amenhotep shouts. Hard to port, rowers, backwater on starboard side. The steersman throws his weight against the steering oars, turning the ship sharply to the left. Half the rowers reverse their stroke, pulling their oars backward, while the other half continues forward stroke, creating a rapid turn that brings the ship's bow around just in time to avoid the enemy ship's charge. The enemy ship passes within 10 yards, close enough that warriors on both sides are shooting arrows at nearly point-blank range. Amenhotep sees an enemy warrior aiming directly at him and throws himself behind his shield just as the arrow strikes. The bronze point, punching through the leather, but stopped by the wooden frame, the point stopping inches from Amenhotep's face. This is the chaos of ancient naval battle, ships maneuvering in close proximity, arrows flying from every direction, fires burning on damaged vessels, men fighting and dying on wooden platforms that offer no escape from combat, the entire scene shrouded in smoke and echoing with shouts and screams and the sounds of battle. As the battle develops into a swirling melee of ships engaging at close quarters, Amenhotep maneuvers his vessel toward another enemy ship that appears isolated from its companions, its crew reduced by arrow casualties, its rowing faltering. The decision to attempt boarding is both tactical and psychological. A captured enemy ship is a prize. It can be towed back to Egypt as proof of victory. Its crew can be enslaved or interrogated. Its cargo can be plundered. But more importantly, successful boarding actions demonstrate dominance, demoralize enemies, and create momentum that can swing the entire battle. Amenhotep brings his ship alongside the enemy vessel with practiced skill, the two ships coming together with a grinding bump of wood on wood, the hulls touching along perhaps 20 feet of their length. Immediately, warriors on both sides hurl grappling hooks, the iron hooks catching on railings and deck fittings, the attached ropes pulled taut, binding the ships together. Marines, board, Nakht shouts, and the Egyptian warriors surge across the gap between ships, some leaping directly from rail to rail, others using the grappling rams to swing across, all carrying their weapons and shields, all screaming war cries meant to intimidate the defenders. The first warriors across the gap crash into the enemy crew, shields raised, spears thrusting. The fighting is brutal and immediate. There is no room for elaborate technique, no time for careful positioning. Men simply stab and slash at whoever is in front of them, trying to kill before being killed. Nacht is among the first across, his spear finding an enemy warrior's throat, blood spraying, the man collapsing. Nacht drops the spear. It is lodged in the dying man's body, and draws his khopesh sword, the curved blade effective for slashing in the confined space of the enemy deck. Around him, other Egyptian warriors are engaging. One Egyptian stabs an enemy rower who has grabbed a spear to defend himself, the rower falling across his rowing bench. Another Egyptian is engaged in a desperate struggle with an enemy warrior wearing bronze armor, the two men grappling, shields locked together, each trying to get his weapon around the other's defenses. The enemy crew fights desperately. They know that defeat means death or slavery, that there is no retreat, that they must win or die. Their defense is fierce, and the Egyptians' initial momentum is slowed as the enemy warriors form a defensive line across the deck, shields overlapping, spears presented, fighting as a coordinated unit despite the chaos. But the Egyptians have numerical advantage. Amenhotep has sent 15 of his 20 warriors across, keeping 5 to defend his own ship, while the enemy ship's crew has been reduced to perhaps 30 total, including rowers. And only 15 of these are armed warriors rather than rowers. More Egyptians continue to cross, widening the penetration, attacking the enemy defensive line from multiple directions. Nacht leads a group attacking from the left, while another group attacks from the right, attempting to envelope and collapse the enemy resistance. The fighting is nightmarishly violent. Men hack at each other with swords and axes at ranges of a few feet, spears thrust into bodies, the bronze points punching through armor and flesh. Shields are split by powerful blows. Blood pools on the wooden deck, making footing treacherous. Amenhotep watches from his own ship, desperately wanting to join the boarding action, but knowing that his role as captain requires him to remain aboard, to command the ship, and to maintain awareness of the larger tactical situation. He keeps one eye on his marines fighting on the enemy deck, and another on the surrounding waters, watching for threats to his own vessel. He sees another Sea People's ship approaching from perhaps 100 yards away, its crew clearly intending to assist their beleaguered comrades. Amenhotep must decide quickly. He can order his marines to withdraw, breaking off the boarding action before it is complete, but preserving his force from being caught between two enemy ships. Or he can hold position, trusting that his marines will capture the enemy ship before the reinforcements arrive, but risking being engaged on two fronts. He makes the aggressive decision. Archers, engage that approaching ship, slow them down. Marines, finish the boarding quickly. The 5 archers remaining on Amenhotep's ship begin shooting at the approaching enemy vessel, their arrows forcing the enemy crew to take cover, slowing their rowing, buying precious time. On the enemy deck, Nacht and his warriors are pressing their advantage. The enemy defensive line is cracking. Several enemy warriors have fallen, and the survivors are being pushed backward toward the stern. The Egyptian numerical advantage is telling, and the enemy resistance is beginning to collapse. One enemy warrior throws down his weapons and raises his hands in surrender, shouting what sounds like a plea for mercy in his own language. Nacht ignores the surrender and kills the man with a sword thrust. In the heat of battle, quarter is rarely given, and prisoners are liabilities that must be guarded and fed. Another enemy warrior attempts to flee by diving overboard, preferring to take his chances in the Nile rather than face the Egyptian swords. But Egyptian archers on Amenhotep's ship shoot the man as he surfaces, his body floating away in the current. Finally, after perhaps 5 minutes of brutal fighting, an eternity in combat, the last enemy resistance collapses. The surviving enemy crew members, perhaps 10 rowers and a few wounded warriors, huddle at the stern, surrounded by Egyptians with bloody weapons, awaiting their fate. Nacht shouts across to Amenhotep, "Ship secured," requesting orders. Amenhotep makes a quick assessment. The approaching enemy ship is now perhaps 50 yards away, too close for his marines to safely withdraw. But the captured ship now belongs to Egypt, and it can be used. Cut the grappling lines, man the oars of the captured ship, and pull away from my vessel. Don't let the approaching enemy catch both ships together. Egyptian warriors cut the ropes binding the two ships together, and marines who know rowing basics scramble to the captured ship's oar benches, taking positions among the dead and wounded enemy rowers. The rowing is ragged and uncoordinated. These are warriors, not trained rowers, but they manage to get the captured ship moving, pulling away from Amenhotep's vessel. The approaching Sea People's ship, seeing the situation, alters course to pursue the captured vessel rather than engaging Amenhotep's ship. This creates a new tactical situation, a chase where the Sea Peoples are attempting to recapture their lost ship. But before this chase can develop, the broader battle intervenes. The Egyptian wings have successfully enveloped the Sea Peoples fleet, and multiple enemy ships are now engaged from multiple directions, surrounded by superior Egyptian numbers. The Sea Peoples fleet is beginning to break. Some ships attempting to flee back down the Nile toward the Mediterranean, others fighting desperate last stands. Amenhotep sees Admiral Temhu's flagship signaling, flags indicating a general advance, orders to pursue fleeing enemies, instructions to capture rather than destroy when possible. The battle is transitioning from the intense clash of initial contact to the pursuit and exploitation phase, where the victorious force hunts down retreating enemies. Amenhotep orders his ship to join the pursuit, rowing after Sea Peoples vessels that are attempting to flee. His archers continue shooting. His marines are ready to board any enemy ship that is overtaken. His ship is pursuing victory with the same intensity it showed in the initial engagement. But Amenhotep also takes a moment to assess his own casualties. 2 of his warriors are dead, one killed by an arrow during the approach, another killed during the boarding action. 5 more are wounded seriously enough to require medical attention: arrow wounds, sword cuts, spear punctures. His ship has taken damage. Several arrows are embedded in the hull. One section of railing is broken. A rowing bench is cracked from a warrior falling heavily on it during the boarding action. But the ship is still functional. The crew's morale is high from the successful boarding action. And Amenhotep's reputation among his men is enhanced by his aggressive and successful tactics. They have captured an enemy ship, have killed many enemies, have demonstrated their worth in the day's great battle. The boarding action, the most intense and dangerous phase of ancient naval warfare, has been survived, has been won, and has contributed to the larger Egyptian victory that is now unfolding across the Nile Delta's waterways. By late afternoon, the battle is essentially over. The Sea Peoples fleet has been destroyed as an organized force. Perhaps 20 enemy ships have been sunk or burned, another 20 have been captured, and the remaining ships have fled back toward the Mediterranean, pursued by Egyptian vessels that will harass them all the way back to the coast. The Nile Delta is littered with the debris of naval warfare, floating wreckage, bodies of warriors and rowers from both sides drifting in the current, damaged ships drifting aimlessly, smoke rising from burning vessels. The water is discolored with blood and debris, and the smell of burning wood and death hangs in the air. Let us examine the aftermath of ancient naval battle through Amenhotep's experiences as he and his crew participate in the grim work of securing victory and salvaging what can be salvaged from the carnage. The first priority is securing captured ships. The Egyptian fleet has taken approximately 20 enemy vessels, either through boarding actions or through enemy crews abandoning ship. These captured ships represent significant value. They can be incorporated into the Egyptian fleet, they can be broken up for their valuable timber and fittings, or they can be presented to Pharaoh as trophies, demonstrating the completeness of the victory. But captured ships must be controlled before they can be valuable. Amenhotep's earlier capture is secured by having enough Egyptian warriors aboard to control the remaining enemy crew members. But other captured ships are adrift with dead or fled crews, and these must be boarded and taken under control. Amenhotep brings his ship alongside one such drifting vessel, a Sea Peoples ship that appears to have been abandoned by its crew, who presumably jumped overboard when their ship caught fire, and who either swam to shore or drowned in the attempt. The fire has burned out, leaving the ship damaged but potentially salvageable. He sends a party of 5 warriors across to inspect the ship and to determine if it can be sailed or if it must be towed. The warriors report back that the hull is sound, the fire damage is mostly to the upper deck and rigging, and with some repairs the ship could be functional. Rig a towline, Amenhotep orders. We'll take this ship back to base, get some of the rowers across to man the steering oars so it doesn't yaw too much under tow. The work of rigging towlines and organizing the captured ship consumes perhaps an hour, work made difficult by fatigue. The crew has been rowing and fighting for most of the day, and by the emotional aftermath of combat. Some warriors are exhilarated by the victory, energized by having survived and won. Others are shocked and subdued, processing what they experienced and witnessed. A few are openly distressed, affected by the violence they inflicted or by the deaths of comrades. While his crew works on securing the captured ship, Amenhotep also deals with his own casualties. The 2 dead warriors are wrapped in linen and laid out on the deck. They will receive proper burial when the fleet returns to base, but for now they must be preserved as best as possible. The 5 seriously wounded men receive what medical care is available. Ancient Egyptian military medicine is relatively advanced for its time. The Egyptians have considerable anatomical knowledge from mummification practices. They have various herbal remedies that have genuine therapeutic effects, and they have practical experience treating combat wounds. The Sheikh's medical specialist, a warrior who has been trained in basic wound treatment, cleans the wounds with water mixed with wine. The alcohol has antiseptic properties, though the Egyptians don't understand the mechanism. Applies poultices made from various herbs, and bandages the wounds with linen strips. One warrior with an arrow wound in the shoulder has the arrow carefully extracted, a delicate process because arrow points sometimes break off inside wounds, causing infections. Fortunately, this arrow is extracted intact, and the wound is cleaned and bandaged. The warrior will likely survive, though he will be unable to use his arm for weeks and may have permanent reduced function. Another warrior with a deep sword cut to his leg is less fortunate. The wound has cut muscle and may have damaged blood vessels, and despite the medical specialist's best efforts, the bleeding cannot be completely stopped. This warrior's prognosis is poor. He will likely die from blood loss or from infection over the coming days, unless the bleeding can be controlled, which seems unlikely with available techniques. While individual ships like Amenhotep's are dealing with their own casualties and captures, the fleet as a whole is organizing a systematic salvage operation. Admiral Chemhu has organized salvage teams that move through the battle area, collecting floating cargo, recovering valuable equipment from damaged or sunk ships, and taking prisoners from enemy crews that swam to shore or that survived aboard captured vessels. The prisoners present a logistical and ethical challenge. The Sea People's warriors taken prisoner, perhaps 200 men from the entire battle, will be enslaved, this being the standard practice for captured enemies in the ancient world. They will be put to work in mines, quarries, or as agricultural laborers, their former status as warriors making them potentially dangerous, but also making them valuable as strang laborers. The treatment of prisoners is brutal by modern standards, but is considered normal for the period. Prisoners are bound with rope, marched or transported under guard, given minimal food and water. Those who resist, or who are judged too dangerous, are simply killed. Those who cooperate and submit are preserved for enslavement. Amenhotep watches as a group of prisoners is brought aboard his ship, 6 Sea People's warriors, their hands bound, their armor and weapons stripped away, looking exhausted and defeated. They will be guarded by Egyptian warriors until they can be transferred to secure holding facilities at the base. One prisoner, a young man perhaps 20 years old, wearing the distinctive feathered helmet of the Sea Peoples, makes eye contact with Amenhotep, and for a moment there is a connection between captor and captive, a recognition of their shared humanity despite being on opposite sides. The young man says something in his own language, words Amenhotep doesn't understand, perhaps a plea or perhaps a curse. Amenhotep feels a complicated mixture of triumph at victory, pity for the defeated enemy, and relief at his own survival. The prisoner will become a slave, will spend the rest of his life in hard labor, will never return to whatever homeland he came from. It is a harsh fate, but it is the reality of ancient warfare. The salvage operation continues through the late afternoon and into early evening. Valuable items recovered from damaged or sunk ships include weapons and armor, bronze fittings and tools, cargo that was being transported, and even the ship's sacred standards and religious items that can be presented as trophies to Pharaoh. Bodies of Egyptian warriors who died in the battle are recovered when possible and are prepared for burial. Enemy bodies are generally left where they fell or are unceremoniously dumped overboard. There is no attempt to honor enemy dead in Egyptian military culture. By evening, the fleet begins regrouping for the return journey to base. The captured ships are secured in a line, towed by Egyptian vessels or sailed by prize crews if they are sufficiently intact. The damaged Egyptian ships that can still move under their own power do so, while those too damaged must be towed or abandoned. The fleet's return is triumphant, but also somber. The Egyptians have won a decisive victory. The Sea People's invasion has been repulsed. The enemy fleet has been destroyed. Egypt's survival has been secured. But the victory has cost lives, perhaps 50 Egyptian dead and 100 wounded from the entire fleet, significant losses that represent the price of success. Admiral Chemhu sends fast vessels ahead to carry news of the victory to Pharaoh, ensuring that Ramesses III learns of the success as quickly as possible. The news will be received with great celebration. The defeat of the Sea Peoples is a major strategic success that secures Egypt's position as the dominant power in the region and that demonstrates Pharaoh's effectiveness as a military leader and as the god's chosen representative on earth. As Amenhotep's ship begins the journey back to base, towing the captured Sea People's vessel, the crew gradually relaxes from combat readiness into exhausted relief. They have survived, they have won, they have performed creditably. Whatever battles the future may bring, they have this victory to remember. While the dramatic combat actions receive the most attention in historical accounts and in popular imagination, the reality of ancient naval warfare is that battles are relatively brief events, punctuating long periods of preparation, training, maintenance, and logistical support. Let us examine these less glamorous but equally essential aspects of Egyptian river warfare. The Egyptian war fleet that fought the Sea Peoples represents a massive logistical undertaking that requires continuous effort by thousands of people: shipwrights, rope makers, sail makers, weapons manufacturers, food suppliers, rowers, warriors, administrators, and numerous others whose combined efforts make the fleet functional. The ships themselves require constant maintenance. The wooden hulls absorb water, swell, and can develop leaks if not properly maintained. The rope lashings that reinforce the hull structure stretch and degrade over time and must be regularly inspected and replaced. The oars wear at their contact points with the oarlocks and must be periodically repaired or replaced. Let us follow the post-battle maintenance work as Amenhotep's ship returns to base and undergoes the repairs necessary to restore it to full fighting capability. The journey back to the naval base takes most of a day, the fleet traveling slowly to accommodate the damaged ships and the towed prizes. When they arrive at the base, a large harbor facility on a Nile canal with shipyards, warehouses, barracks, and administrative buildings, the work of post-battle recovery begins immediately. Amenhotep's ship is directed to a shipyard berth where it will be hauled out of the water for inspection and repairs. The hauling process uses log rollers and rope windlasses operated by teams of laborers, similar to the launching process, but in reverse, pulling the ship up a sloped beach until it rests on supports that allow access to all parts of the hull. A master shipwright named Ptahhotep conducts a thorough inspection, examining every plank, every joint, every rope lashing, identifying all damage and wear that must be addressed. His assessment is detailed and professional. He has been building and repairing ships for 30 years, knows every potential problem, and takes pride in his expertise. The hull is generally sound, Ptahhotep reports to Amenhotep. The wood has swelled well from being in water, which is good. It means the joints are tight. But we have arrow damage in 3 locations that penetrated through the outer planking. These need to be patched with new wood. We have stress cracks in 2 of the deck beams from the impacts during boarding. These beams should be replaced. Several rope lashings show fraying and should be renewed. And the steering oar mounting on the port side is loose, needs to be resecured. The repair work begins immediately. Carpenters cut patches from cedar boards, shaping them to fit precisely over the arrow damage, securing them with wooden pegs and caulking the edges with pitch to ensure watertightness. The damaged deck beams are removed and replaced with new beams cut to exact dimensions. The rope lashings are more time-consuming to replace. The worn ropes must be cut away, new ropes must be threaded through the same attachment points, and the ropes must be pulled extremely tight to create the tension necessary for structural reinforcement. This work requires teams of workers using mechanical advantage systems, pulleys and capstans to achieve the necessary tension. While the hull repairs proceed, other specialists work on the ship's equipment. The sail has several small tears from enemy arrows and from stress during maneuvers. These are sewn closed by sailmakers using strong linen thread. The rigging ropes are inspected, and several are replaced due to fraying or stress damage. The oars are examined, and 3 are found to have cracks that make them unsafe for continued use. These are set aside for disposal, and are replaced with new oars from the fleet's reserve stocks. The shields that were damaged during the battle are either repaired if damage is minor, or are replaced with new shields from the armory. The weapons used during the battle are cleaned, sharpened, and returned to the ship's weapons locker. Arrows that were recovered after the battle are inspected. Those with damaged points or shafts are discarded. while those still serviceable are added back to the ship's arrow supply. The ship started the battle with approximately 600 arrows, 30 per warrior for 20 warriors, and expended perhaps 400 during the fighting, so new arrows must be drawn from the fleet armory to restore the full complement. The logistics of supplying these replacement materials demonstrate the scale of the support system required for a war fleet. The fleet's storehouses contain thousands of oars, hundreds of sails, miles of rope in various diameters, tons of pitch for waterproofing, countless wooden planks and beams, and vast quantities of weapons and arrows. These materials must be manufactured continuously to replace normal wear and combat losses. The shipyards employ hundreds of workers, carpenters who shape wood, rope makers who twist fibers into cordage, weavers who create linen sails, smiths who forge bronze fittings and weapons, and specialized craftsmen for numerous other tasks. The supply chains extend across Egypt and beyond. The best ship timber, Lebanese cedar, must be imported from Phoenicia, requiring trade relationships and payment. Bronze for weapons and fittings requires copper, mined in Sinai, and tin, imported from distant sources, possibly Anatolia or even Afghanistan. Linen for sails requires flax cultivation and processing. The economic burden of maintaining a war fleet is substantial. Beyond physical materials, the fleet requires provisions for its personnel. Amenhotep's ship has a crew of 50 men, 30 rowers, 20 warriors who must be fed daily. The standard Egyptian military ration is approximately 2 pounds of bread, some beer, a nutritious beverage in Egyptian culture, providing calories and some vitamins, occasionally meat or fish, onions, and other vegetables when available. For a fleet of 60 ships, with average crew sizes of 50 men, this represents 3,000 men requiring approximately 3 tons of bread daily, plus corresponding quantities of other foods. For a campaign lasting weeks or months, the total food requirement is enormous. Hundreds of tons of grain must be stored, transported, distributed, and eventually baked into bread or brewed into beer. The fleet's administrative system manages all these logistics through a bureaucratic structure that the Egyptians have developed over millennia. Scribes maintain detailed records of ships, personnel, supplies issued and consumed, repairs completed, casualties suffered. These records allow commanders to assess the fleet's readiness and allow administrators to plan for future needs. One such scribe, a man named Amenemhat, sits in an administrative building near the shipyard, writing on papyrus with reed pen and black ink, recording the details of Amenhotep's ship. Ship Mighty Bull of Ra, Captain Amenhotep, returned from battle against the Sea Peoples in the Delta, captured 1 enemy vessel, casualties, 2 warriors killed, 5 wounded, ship damage, 3 arrow penetrations of hull, 2 deck beams cracked, 7 rope lashings requiring replacement, 1 steering oar mounting loose, arrows expended, approximately 400, estimated repair time, 5 days, estimated return to service, 6 days after completion of repairs. This bureaucratic recording seems mundane compared to the dramatic battle, but it is equally essential. Without accurate records, the fleet cannot plan effectively, cannot allocate resources efficiently, cannot maintain readiness for future operations. The human dimension of fleet logistics also includes the care of casualties. The wounded warriors from Amenhotep's ship are transported to a medical facility where they receive more comprehensive treatment than was possible aboard ship. Some will recover fully, some will have permanent disabilities, and some will die from infections or complications. The families of warriors killed in battle receive notifications and receive whatever compensation or support the military system provides. This is both a matter of fairness and a matter of maintaining morale among the living warriors, who need to know that their families will be cared for if they die in service. The enormous logistical apparatus that supports the Egyptian war fleet, the shipyards, the workshops, the warehouses, the administrative systems, the supply chains, represents a sophisticated organizational achievement that rivals the tactical achievements of the battles themselves. Ancient Egypt could field and sustain effective naval forces not just because Egyptian warriors were brave or skilled, but because Egyptian civilization had developed the economic and administrative systems necessary to support complex military operations. As we conclude our exploration of how ancient Egyptian warriors fought river battles on the Nile, let us examine what historical evidence tells us about these practices, what we can know with confidence and what remains uncertain, and what these naval battles reveal about ancient warfare and Egyptian civilization. The primary historical source for the battle we have been describing is the temple complex at Medinet Habu, built by Ramesses III to commemorate his military victories. The temple walls feature extensive reliefs depicting the battle against the Sea Peoples, showing Egyptian and enemy ships, warriors fighting on decks, the various stages of the battle, and the ultimate Egyptian victory. These reliefs are extraordinarily valuable historical evidence. They provide visual documentation of ship designs, weapons, armor, and tactics from the Late Bronze Age, preserved in stone for over 3,000 years. But they must be interpreted carefully, as they are propaganda pieces designed to glorify Pharaoh and Egypt, rather than objective documentary records. The reliefs show the battle from an Egyptian perspective, emphasizing Egyptian successes and minimizing or omitting Egyptian losses or difficulties. The Sea Peoples are depicted as defeated and fleeing, while the Egyptians are shown as victorious and dominant. These depictions reflect political and ideological purposes as much as historical accuracy. Accompanying the reliefs are hieroglyphic inscriptions describing the battle in text. These inscriptions provide additional details, but also reflect the same propagandistic purposes. They describe the Sea Peoples as those who came from the sea, and as threats to Egypt's existence, justifying the military response and celebrating the Egyptian victory. Archaeological evidence supplements the temple reliefs. Shipwrecks from the Bronze Age Mediterranean provide information about ship construction techniques, confirming that ancient ships were indeed built using mortars and tenon joints and rope lashings, as our narrative described. Weapons and armor from the period show the types of bronze points, the linen armor, the composite bow construction that Egyptian warriors would have used. What can we conclude with confidence about Egyptian naval warfare from these combined sources? First, the Egyptians did indeed develop significant naval capabilities during the New Kingdom period, approximately 1550 to 1077 BCE. While Egypt is not traditionally thought of as a naval power like later Greece or Rome, the Egyptians did build and operate war fleets on the Nile and in the Mediterranean, and they did fight naval battles against various enemies. The ships were indeed constructed using sophisticated woodworking techniques that created seaworthy vessels capable of carrying significant numbers of warriors and of engaging in combat. The ships were not primitive rafts or simple boats, but were complex engineered vessels representing considerable technological achievement. Third, the battles were fought using tactics appropriate to the technology and environment. Close-range combat using arrows and spears, boarding actions, attempts to set enemy ships on fire. These tactics reflect the capabilities and limitations of Bronze Age weapons and the characteristics of river and coastal naval warfare. Fourth, the logistics required to support a war fleet were substantial and required sophisticated organizational systems. The Egyptians had developed the bureaucratic and economic capabilities necessary to build, maintain, and operate war fleets, demonstrating the organizational sophistication of ancient Egyptian civilization. What remains uncertain or debated? The scale of the battle is unclear. The temple reliefs suggest a large battle involving many ships, but the exact numbers are not specified. Modern estimates of fleet sizes vary, with some scholars suggesting the numbers in our narrative, approximately 60 Egyptian ships, are reasonable, while others argue for smaller or larger forces. The effectiveness of various weapons and tactics is difficult to determine precisely. While we know the types of weapons used, we cannot know exactly how effective arrow fire was at various ranges, how frequently boarding actions succeeded, how often ships were successfully set on fire. Our narrative presents plausible scenarios based on general principles and on analogies to later naval warfare, but the specific details remain somewhat speculative. The casualty figures are particularly uncertain. Ancient sources rarely provide reliable casualty counts, and the Egyptian sources for this battle provide no specific numbers. Our narrative's estimates, approximately 50 Egyptian dead from a fleet engagement, are plausible but cannot be confirmed from historical sources. The long-term consequences of the battle are also debated. The Egyptian sources claim a complete victory that permanently ended the Sea Peoples' threat. Some modern scholars accept this interpretation, arguing that the naval battle and associated land campaigns did indeed stop the Sea Peoples' invasions. Others argue that the Sea Peoples' threat was overstated or that the battles were less decisive than Egyptian propaganda claimed. What is clear is that Egypt survived the Late Bronze Age collapse, the widespread civilizational disruption around 1200 to 1150 BCE that destroyed the Hittite Empire, devastated numerous Mediterranean cities, and ended the Bronze Age civilization in many regions. Egypt was weakened but maintained continuity, and the defeat of the Sea People's invasion was likely a factor in this survival. The legacy of Egyptian naval warfare extends beyond the specific battles. The Egyptians demonstrated that sophisticated naval operations were possible in the ancient world, that river and coastal powers could develop effective war fleets, and that naval battles could be tactically complex and strategically significant. The organizational systems that supported Egyptian naval warfare, the shipbuilding industries, the logistical networks, the administrative bureaucracies, demonstrate the capabilities of ancient civilizations to organize complex military operations. These capabilities were not unique to Egypt, but were shared by other successful ancient powers, and they represent important achievements in human organizational and technological development. For modern readers, the study of ancient Egyptian naval warfare offers several insights. First, ancient peoples were not technologically primitive or organizationally unsophisticated. The Egyptians built complex ships, conducted complex operations, and sustained these efforts through sophisticated logistics and administration. While their technology was different from ours, their organizational capabilities were in some ways comparable. Second, geography shapes military capabilities and strategies. Egypt's dependence on the Nile influenced every aspect of Egyptian naval warfare: ship designs, tactics, strategic considerations. Understanding this geographic context is essential for understanding Egyptian military history. Third, sources must be critically evaluated. The temple reliefs at Medinet Habu are valuable evidence, but must be recognized as propaganda as well as documentation. Historical conclusions must be based on careful interpretation of potentially biased sources. Fourth, warfare has always been about more than just fighting. The logistics, the organization, the economic and social systems that support military forces, these are as important as tactics and weapons. As we conclude our exploration of ancient Egyptian river battles on the Nile, we can appreciate both the specific achievements of Egyptian warriors and naval personnel and the broader lessons about ancient warfare and civilization. Warriors like our fictional captain Amenhotep represent real people who served in Egyptian naval forces, who fought in battles on the Nile, who contributed to Egypt's survival during the critical period of the late Bronze Age collapse. The ships they sailed, the tactics they employed, the battles they fought, these are part of the rich military history of ancient Egypt, a civilization that achieved greatness not just through pyramids and temples, but also through military effectiveness and organizational sophistication. The river battles on the Nile represent one dimension of this achievement, demonstrating that ancient Egyptian warriors could master the challenges of naval warfare just as they mastered so many other aspects of their remarkable civilization.